Hey guys, Pete here. This is going to be my Westworld Season 1 Episode 8 review. A ton of stuff happened to get set up for the last 2 episodes. This video will have spoilers if you aren't caught up through Episode 8, so proceed with caution. There's a lot of trickery and confusing bits in the episode, so I tried not to go down any rabbit holes during the recap part. I'll put a timestamp link in the description to when the discussion theory section starts, so you can skip right to that if you want. In the first scene, we see Ford bring Bernard back online, which is a cool twist on what we've seen before. He immediately remembers what he's done to Teresa. Ford explains to him that he built him because the human engineers weren't up to the task of providing him what he wanted. He says the original host emotions were primary colors and he wanted all the shades in between. He tells him that together they captured that elusive thing, heart. Bernard is confused and feeling real pain. He tells Ford he loved her and asks why he made him do it. Ford explains that one man's life or death was but a small price to pay for the acquirement of the knowledge which he sought, for the dominion he should acquire. Bernard refuses to continue and then starts to freak out. Ford freezes him and says that Bernard is not the first man to threaten him. Arnold came to feel the way he does. He couldn't stop me either. Ford also says, the only thing more sublime than creating this array of emotions is being able to turn them off. He sets Bernard back to his old self, and then he puts his glasses back on and asks, how would you like me to proceed? We see the command center while we hear Ford's instruction. He says he needs him to clean up his mess, any connection that ties us to Teresa's demise. We see Bernard going around removing details that would put him in the same place as her, and hear Ford say that once he's done, he will give him the thing he wants most right now. He'll remove his memories of what he did to Teresa and all the memories to their relationship. We see Bernard collecting evidence and then destroying it at a high-tech incinerator. Ford says that he'll remember Teresa as a respected colleague. From there we go to the Mariposa, where we see Maeve and Clementine's new replacement. Her name is still Clem, but Maeve doesn't look to be enjoying the replacement. She just stares at her when she asks her if something's wrong. We hear the House of the Rising Sun playing on the player piano, and when Maeve is looking confused, the sound slows down. She then sees herself with her child in the old story. Next, she's with Felix and Sylvester and asking them what's happening to her. She explains that she's jumping between the stories and can't tell which is real. Sylvester says this is what happens when you fuck around with your brain. Felix explains it in a little more detail, that they are designed differently than people whose memories are hazy on details. She remembers memories perfectly, she relives them. Maeve then asks about the little girl in her dreams. Is she still in the park somewhere? And why was she reassigned in the first place? Felix says he can check, but she says no, saying everything she remembers is a story created by the park to keep her there. That's not going to work anymore because she's getting out. From there we find out that every host has an explosive charge in their spine that will detonate if they try to leave. Felix points out that she would need a total rebuild to remove it, which doesn't slow Maeve down at all. Then he says, even if she pulled that off, she would need an army to get out. She tells them it's time to write her own fucking story and starts to use their pad to put her plan of getting allies together in motion. William and Dolores are riding up on the river and she tells him she's been there before, that they're close. When he asks close to what, she says home. She walks through a clearing and finds a bunch of dead Confederados with one clinging to life. William asks him about if they came for them and asks how they knew about the train. He explains a new recruit told them that a woman and a man had double-crossed them, and then William responds, Logan. Dolores walks over to the water to collect some in the canteen to give the dying man. She slips into a memory that shows she's been there before. She hears a voice that doesn't sound like Bernard say, find me. She then sees her own dead body in the water, and when she looks back, doesn't see William for a second. She comes back to present time, and when she walks over to the Confederado and William, he dies. Stubbs tells Ford and Charlotte that they found Teresa's body in a ravine on Python Pass, the same ravine where they found the stray woodcutter. From that point on, we get a grand display of Ford's strategy and power. Stubbs says the injuries are consistent with a fall and shows them that they found transmitters with the body. He points out that she may have been behind the woodcutter, and when it failed, she tried to do it herself. He goes tit for tat with Charlotte some, and then reveals that he knows someone from Q&A altered the code to make Clementine put on her little display. He says that they should take over until the Q&A people can be replaced, and then puts Bernard back in his job since he was fired on false pretenses. It's a gripping scene that ends there, but we can see it's clearly a chess game between Charlotte and Ford, which he won. Teresa basically becomes collateral damage. In the next scene, Maeve looks to be casually using the touchpad as Felix is trying to look busy. Sylvester comes back and says there's a major problem in the park and an investigation. He says it's not about them, but they should quit messing around with Maeve right away. She hands the touchpad back and says she found out what she needed to learn. She explains there are some things in her that are quite old, that there are dormant things which she's designed to do but are just out of her reach. It's as if there are two minds arguing with each other in the code. Then she asks who is Arnold, which sends Sylvester into a rant saying they can't do anything for her about the dormant things. She needs the people and behavior for that. Of course, she tells them that she needs to get in there and that there is a window during the shift change. She adds what she needs them to do is quite complicated, but she'll write it down for them. They go outside the room and Sylvester tells Felix of his plan to take her up there and wipe her clean. Neither of them seem very confident about the plan, but they see it as their only chance to fix their situation. The Man in Black and Teddy are riding, and Teddy tells him to be careful that they are now in Wyatt's territory. They talk some as they go about how Teddy only remembers what Ford lets him remember and how the game is rigged. When he says he is there to play the loser, we see Teddy flash back to when we saw him say that to him the last time in episode 1. They come across some dead bodies and one host that is still alive. It's the host that welcomed William when he first arrived, only she's playing a different role. The Man in Black recognizes her right away and says, "It's you. Thought they would have retired you. Guess Ford doesn't like to get rid of a pretty face." While Teddy is tending to her, the Man in Black looks around. We hear a noise and then one of Wyatt's men attack. Teddy shoots him, which doesn't slow him down, although we see that the bullets go in rather than bouncing off like they do with people. The Man in Black stabs him in the back, but he just gets pushed right out of the way. He then grabs a rope and wraps it around the guy's neck. While he's pulling on the guy, Teddy remembers seeing him dragging Dolores. Eventually, Teddy uses the axe to kill the attacker. The Man in Black says, "Well, you don't remember anything, but you still managed to lead us to Wyatt's crew. The man himself must be close by." Teddy gets up to say, "Actually, I do remember something. You," and then pistol whips him, knocking him out. Things move right along in Maeve's story as we see them wheeling her into behavior. She pairs up with the computer, then asks Felix if he's sure he's up to this. He says they have to shut her down now, and in an awesome move, she says, "Sylvester, good luck," as she looks at him. When Felix shuts her down, she freezes that way, just staring at him. The scene ends with Felix thinking about reformatting her. Lee Sizemore is working on a new host when Charlotte walks in. She tells him that Teresa died doing something important for the board. She also tells him that Ford is having him do busy work, but that she thinks he's ready for a real job. Apparently, Lee thought he was designing Wyatt for Ford's new narrative. We see Sylvester trying to console Felix after wiping Maeve out. She pops up and says he didn't do it. Instead, he did exactly what she asked him to do. She asks if he would like to know what they're up to, and then says they've been changing her core coding. She gets up and slices Sylvester's throat with a scalpel. Felix is shocked and says, "You promised not to hurt anyone," and she tells him that you of all people should know exactly how duplicitous I am. Just wait until I'm back up top practicing my other new talent. She then gives him a device and says, "Come on, we might need him." We learn that he can use it to heal the slash that Maeve just gave Sylvester. After he saves his life, Maeve says, "Now it's time to recruit my army." We see her wake up and then see her looking at a pocket watch in the Mariposa. The new Clementine comes over to ask if she's waiting for someone. She says yes, an old friend from out of town, and then the bartender comes up behind. He says he hopes the friend has deep pockets because her tab is getting out of hand. She looks at him and says no, Maeve's tab was in such excellent standing that she deserved a token of gratitude. He sort of freezes while she says this and then offers her a double round of top shelf on him. After she has the drink, she sees a small child with her mother outside. She relives her memory in the old storyline, and this time we see the Man in in black stab her in the abdomen. She comes back to in the Mariposa holding her stomach and then takes control of Clementine and then the bartender. She has Clem get the other girls and take the men playing cards at the front table upstairs on the house, and has the bartender remember that he has some whiskey out back he needs to water down. Hector shows up right on time and Maeve helps him every step of the way. She messes with the sheriff and the marshals, and Hector can get the safe out of the Mariposa. Maeve has a satisfying look on her face as she realizes she can rewrite the narratives in real time. Ford is with Bernard and it looks like he is removing his painful memories of Teresa. Bernard brings up Charlotte, but Ford says they'll be able to handle her. He notices Ford has something else on his mind, which starts a conversation. Ford says that Bernard is in a unique position. He's a programmer who knows how the machines work and a machine that knows its own true nature. Bernard says he knows how he's coded but doesn't understand the things that he feels. He asks if his wife and son are real, and Ford reminds him that every host has a backstory. The self is the story that we tell ourselves, and it needs to have a beginning. Bernard's suffering makes him lifelike. Bernard asks, lifelike but not alive. He says pain only exists in the mind, so what's the difference between my pain and yours, between you and me? Ford says this was the very question that consumed Arnold, filled him with guilt, eventually turned him mad. He says the answer always seemed obvious to him. There is no threshold that makes the sum greater than its parts, no inflection point at which we become fully alive. We can't define consciousness because consciousness doesn't exist. He says that humans fancy that there is something special about the way we perceive the world, yet we live in loops as tight and closed as the hosts do. He tells Bernard he isn't missing anything, and then gets ready to remove that part of his memory until Bernard says, wait, one last thing. He asks if he's ever made him hurt anyone like this before, to which Ford answers no. Then we see him have a flashback of choking Elsie. William and Dolores arrive at the river and she says she's home. We see there's a town there that she approaches. As she walks up, she slips into a memory and we see her clothes change and the town becomes filled with hosts. We start to notice that it's the city from the flashback when Ford was telling Bernard about the early days of the park before the guests arrive. We see the white church in the background, and then Lawrence's daughter walks up to say good morning and asks Dolores if she found what she was looking for. We hear a gunshot and the little girl takes off as we see there are dead hosts everywhere on the ground. We see that it looks like a male host is shooting the others, but then see what looks like Dolores looking at herself. As she puts the gun up to her head wearing the blue dress, we see her change back to real time with William running up to stop her. She seems lost because she can't tell what's real anymore. She says, when are we? Is this now? Am I going mad? Are you real? William reassures her he is real, and then she tells him she feels like she's stuck in a dream. His remedy is to get her away from where they are because he thinks her being so far from Sweetwater is causing the problem. We see that the white church is no longer there and that only the skeleton of the steeple remains. When Dolores notices, she has a flashback and she tells William this is what Arnold wants. He wants me to remember. William says that whoever Arnold is, he isn't there, but William is, so she needs to get out of the location. As they're walking, she says she was almost certain that that was where she was supposed to go, that Arnold would meet her there. As they continue up the trail, Logan comes up with a group of soldiers. He says he's been looking for them for days, and man, are you two fucked. Charlotte and Lee are in cold storage, and we notice the old logo on the doors as they pass through. We find out Charlotte's plan is to copy 35 years of vitally important data to Peter Abernathy. She tells him that a host mind has more capacity than any drive, especially once they've been wiped clean like he has. Lee's job is to give Peter some semblance of a personality so that he can make it out of the train out of the park. Lee doesn't understand how he's supposed to do that, but she leaves him with the task and tells him to figure it out. Stubb catches up with Bernard and implies that he knows Teresa's death must be hard on him because of their affair. It seems like Ford's memory wipe worked because he looks like he doesn't know what Stubbs is talking about. They go back and forth a bit and Bernard just basically stays on script, which noticeably confuses the hell out of Stubbs. When Bernard says he has to get back to work, Stubbs also asks if he's heard from Elsie. He says he tried to get in touch with her about Teresa, but didn't hear back. Bernard basically says she's probably off enjoying her time and just walks away. We see that Teddy has the Man in Black tied up and is talking to Angela, who's telling him about Wyatt's men. The Man in Black comments that it looks like you two found yourselves in a new narrative together. Teddy says he has spent a long time with him yet knows nothing about him, and happily he's figured out how to make him talk. He starts beating him up and he tells him that he remembers what he did to Dolores. The Man in Black responds, "You're actually remembering." Teddy says he's going to kill him slow, and Ed Harris says no he won't. The rules of this place hold him back, but he knows how to change them. Teddy says he talks like he owns the world, and he replies not just this one. He tells him he's a god. Titan of industry, philanthropist, family man, married to a beautiful woman, father to a beautiful daughter. I'm the good guy, Teddy. He then explains that last year his wife took the wrong pills and fell asleep in the bathtub. At her funeral, his daughter told him that she did it on purpose, killed herself, and that it was basically the Man in Black's fault. Teddy asked if he hurt them too, which he says he never did. They never saw anything like the man he is in there. The Man in Black says he came back to Westworld to prove her wrong. Only this time he didn't join one of Ford's stories, he devised his own, a test. He found an ordinary woman, which was Maeve, in her old story, who we then see in present time back at the Mariposa. She tells the new Clementine that she's leaving, and we see her walk outside. We hear the Man in Black's story continue. He says he wanted to see if he could do something truly evil. As Maeve's walking, there's a gunshot that we see kicks in the memory of the Man in Black's visit. Maeve's on the ground with the knife in her stomach, and her daughter is moving across the room scared. The Man in Black continues to tell the story to Teddy. He says that he shot the little girl just to see how it felt, but just as he was done, Maeve had refused to die. As we see her pull the knife out and slash at his throat, we cut back to her in the street to see that she's cut Clementine's throat. Teddy calls him an animal, but the Man in Black counters that an animal would have felt something. He felt nothing. But then something miraculous happened. In all his years coming there, he'd never seen anything like it. We see Maeve carry her daughter outside as he watches, and he tells us she was truly alive, if only for a moment. That is when the maze revealed itself to him. Teddy asks what the damn pattern has to do with this. He replies, everything. In Ford's game, he can go to the outer edges, but nothing can hurt him. He knows there's a deeper game, Arnold's game, and that game cuts deep. We look back at Maeve and see people are closing in to capture her now that she's killed Clem in the middle of the street. She eludes the hosts and makes it back to her room by controlling the story so that one of them shoots the other ones who are chasing her. But there we see that the text that Stubbs sent are basically closing in on her. She looks in the mirror and falls into another memory. She's back at the center after the Man in Black incident, and the text can't control her with voice commands. Ford and Bernard show up and they see that her cognition is fragmenting. Ford erases the memory, saying, an old trick from an old friend. You need not suffer, Maeve. I'll take it from you. Maeve pleads she doesn't want him to do it since that pain is all she has left to remember her daughter. Ford continues and explains that tomorrow this will all be a distant dream. As he finishes, we see her grab a scalpel to plunge in her neck, and then we see her back in real time looking in the mirror again. We see her plotting her next move as we see the text getting close. We hear them say that behavior wants her down for an immediate diagnostic. We finish up with the Man in Black, who says that the maze is the only thing that matters now. Besting Wyatt is the last step to getting to it and giving both their lives what they lack, a meaning, even if it kills them. Angela speaks up to tell Teddy to kill him. He says he's tied and unarmed, to which she responds, so was the little girl he killed. Teddy pulls his gun but can't do it, and then Angela says she can help. She stabs Teddy in the chest with an arrow and tells him it's time he came back to the fold. She says Wyatt will need him soon, and then we see his men start coming out of the woods. The Man in Black looks on, and the scene ends with a large group of them advancing. So this was a crazy episode chock full of stuff. First things first, is it just me, or did the Man in Black confirm alternate time frames? When he sees Angela, who is the host that welcomed William to the park, he says, I thought they would have retired you. I'm not sure how non-believers of William and the Man in Black being at the park at different times can explain this one away. To me, that theory seems to be confirmed by this blatant reference, although it was already looking solid before that. Let me know what you guys think in the comments, though. I don't want to go on and on about it. I just think that that's a pretty straightforward clue that there's two different time frames in the show. Maeve pretty much has the Force now. It's really interesting because we are seeing this parallel story with her and Bernard. Ford is talking about how Bernard has reached a new place, knowing that he's a machine, while at the same time totally understanding how things work. Maeve is basically right there with him, but also may have advanced beyond him since she doesn't seem to be under Ford's thumb. She can rewrite the narratives in real time, which is something we haven't seen Bernard ever do before. I mean, it's been clear that not only is Bernard a host, but he's a special kind of host. He can do different things, he can remember things, so on and so forth. Maeve almost seems like she just leapfrogged him into the lead for the craziest, most capable host now, though. I don't know. I know by the end of the episode she looks to be trapped, and that things aren't really going her way. But I think it would be a mistake to underestimate her at this point. I don't think it was all part of her plan because the memory looked like it threw things off. But that said, I can't imagine that she won't pull out some sort of backup plan before all's said and done. We're going to have to talk about Elsie, and the only thing I can say is she dead? Is Elsie dead? To me, the shot looked like Bernard was choking her with her feet off the ground, which is pretty deadly. What are the possible scenarios where that wouldn't have killed her? I mean, now there's the thing where she could be a host since everyone could be a host. But are there any other options? It doesn't feel like the end of her story. I mean, that's what I thought anyways. She's a major character, so it seems cheap if they just kill her off in a short memory. I think we'll learn more, and frankly hope so, because I'd like to see a scenario where she isn't dead because I really like the character. Is Ford just messing with Bernard? I mean, obviously he's messing with Bernard, but the whole idea of him not believing that Bernard is missing anything compared to humans. Or is he really playing God with the idea that hosts are maybe an upgrade for humans, in that they can remember things perfectly but can also have those memories wiped out if they become an impediment? Do you guys think he made them remember things that way on purpose? The name of the episode is Trace Decay, which is a theory about how we forget in really simple terms. It relates to what Felix was telling Maeve about how memories are fuzzy on the details. From what I understand, Trace Decay says that our memories produce some kind of trace, physical or chemical, that starts to decay over time. I imagine that Ford knows about this, which makes me think he might have made a conscious decision to make the host different in that way. I mean, think about it. What he tells Bernard about his cornerstone. He says that self is the story that we tell ourselves. The hosts have clear memories which we see as causing problems, but they're also designed in a way that he can keep tight control of them if they glitch out. It reinforces the idea he's playing God, I think. It makes it look like he is making them into what he perceives as perfect beings. The question, I guess, is what is his end goal for these perfect beings? The old steeple was like thrown in there as a trick about the time frame, since we see it in present like that, or we did anyways whenever Ford was looking around planning the new narrative. But it also separates the building phase from when the park was in its early days. Dolores' memories are confusing her in the same way that Maeve's are, only we believe that this is happening to Dolores long before, and possibly as a direct result of something Arnold did. Dolores' story kind of went backwards in some ways in this episode, since we see William pull her back when she thinks she's getting close. It's also confusing to me because Ford has tied this into the new narrative he created with the White Church. What I think we definitely learned, though, was that something major happened with the hosts before they ever opened up Westworld to the guests. And even though there's nothing clear about it, we know that even though Maeve's not one of the bicameral hosts, or at least we haven't seen that, she does have that coding that is triggering the same thing that it did in Dolores all that time ago. We learned a little more about Arnold and a lot more about the Man in Black. Bernard is or was struggling with the same problem that Arnold had. It's hard for him to understand what makes the hosts different since they experience real feelings. If we trust Ford's retelling, it drove Arnold mad, but we see him attempt to nip it in the bud with Bernard. The Elsie flashback makes you wonder how effective that whole thing was, though. I'm not sure we got enough information to understand why Wyatt's men are so tough to kill, but it was cool to see Angela come back in a different role. It was also interesting to learn about the Man in Black's backstory, even if the details of what he does for a living are pretty vague. The event that turned him into what came off to us as, or came off to us as pure evil when we first met him in the beginning, that works. Why he killed Maeve and her daughter, that works too. And this all could explain how someone like nice guy William might have turned into the character, even if they don't look that much alike. Not a confirmation in a show like this, but it does confirm that the Man in Black is in no way concerned with his own life. The Maze reveal it's not something we can look at and say, oh, that all makes sense. We can understand why he did what he did, but can only guess as to why she falls down to die right on top of the maze pattern. I think at this point we should probably just leave it there. Please like the video if you enjoyed it, and please subscribe to my channel so you don't miss any of my new videos. Leave me some comments if you have questions, theories, or ideas about how these last 2 episodes are going to go down. You can also find me on Twitter most of the time if you want to continue the conversation there. Thanks for watching. I'll talk to you soon.